This is Amplify You, the podcast about you discovering your message and broadcasting it to the world. If you're a coach, author, or speaker, you'll want to tune in. If you're looking for the best return on your time investment to get your message out to the world in a bigger way, we're giving you full access and behind the scenes look of how we're running our podcast, how our clients have found success, and what you can do to launch your podcast today. The world needs your message. I'm Michelle Abraham, the host. Join my family as we unleash your unique genius and find the connections you need to launch your adventure today. Join us and let's get amplified. Hello, Amplify You, Michelle Abraham, your host here today. And have I got a special interview for you? I know I say that every day, but I really do. I'm very excited about our behind the mic interview today with Jen Ingram. She is a podcaster with us at Amplify You, and her podcast is called A Whole Lotta Shift. And it's for women who are multi-passionate entrepreneurs or with an entrepreneurial spirit. And she's got inspiration and motivation and education to really help them shift away from all the shots and shoulds and supposed tos and things that, make us feel like, oh, as entrepreneurs, I should be doing this. And she's really going to help you find out what's really, truly possible. So Jen, welcome to the show. So nice to have you here.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Now, I shared a little bit about the podcast. Can you take us back to the inspiration? You're about 13 or 14 episodes in, or 12 or 13 episodes in, which is great. That's, first of all, congratulations, because 75% of podcasts, I don't know if you know this, don't make it past episode 12. So you are a rock star. You did it. And you're having fun, is what you told me earlier.
Yeah, I'm actually having a blast. So, it's funny. I wanted to be on a podcast or to have a podcast for several years. Really kind of since I started getting into listening to podcasts, I was always like, I could do that. That sounds like fun. And so, I was like the kid at school that would get in trouble all the time because I talked too much. And then the teacher would sit me next to all the boys thinking that would stop me from talking, only I talked more. So I was like, I could do a podcast. But so what really became part of the inspiration was I wanted to get the message out more than what I was able to do through maybe just networking in my local community or even on some social media. I wanted really another way to get the message out to women who were really kind of maybe struggling in their side hustle and had all these amazing ideas and we're trying to reach their full potential, but we're stuck in that whole thing of all the shoulds or supposed tos and the pressures of society. And I just wanted to get that message out. And I thought a podcast was an amazing way to do that. And I am having a blast. And so it is getting me exactly what I wanted. I wanted to have fun in my business, which is something that I preach to all my clients. And then I'm definitely having fun and I'm getting the message out and have met some incredible guests along the way. So yes, I'm loving it.
Yes, it's so good when you finally get started. I know for me, it took me a little while to get started on my podcast. Once I started going, it's like, I did this podcast, and then I'm like, oh, I have another idea for another podcast, and I have another idea for another podcast. I'm stopping myself at 4 right now. And so no more podcasts for me. I'm still having so much fun with it. So I'm glad that you're having fun with your show. Now, you mentioned that, the entrepreneurial spirited woman that you want to talk to is multi-passionate. For our listeners that maybe don't know what that means, can you just share what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's that woman who has really kind of approached life with that spirit of, hey, I want to try that. I want to learn about that. And was never afraid to just say, if that means I'm going to completely change gears, if that means I'm in the middle of college and I'm almost done, but I'm going to change majors and add on to whatever that looks like, then I'm willing to do that. And just kind of sees Earth is her playground and something that she can dive into different areas because she has so many passions. We're taught from an earlier age, pick something that you want to do, and that needs to be the one thing that you live. And I just think that's got kind of a false pretense. Really, that's not how we are as humans. We have lots of thoughts and ideas and passions. And so why not just live that in your everyday life? So it's really about the woman who has that spirit, who says, I'm not just one thing. I don't just have one single specialty. I'm good at a lot of things, and I enjoy digging into all of them.
Ooh, that's cool. I like that. So not just a nurse, I have a nurse that loves cryptocurrency, and I love, skiing and going on exotic trips. And hey, I make money from doing all those things too at the same time, right?
Exactly. Yes.
That's awesome. And so do you find that, the woman you're talking to, is she is still in a full-time career and doing a side hustle, or is she finding the courage to make that leap? I know your latest episode is called Making the Leap, Keys to the Successful First Year of Business. So I'm just curious if that's really the woman that's about to take that leap.
Yeah, the woman who's about to take that leap, or maybe she already has. And the one thing I preach over and over is this path to entrepreneurship is not completely linear. And just like you just mentioned, you could have so many passions, so you could have various streams of income. And so what might that look like? And so it's for that woman who says either, hey, I'm trying to take this side hustle that I've had and leave my full-time job, or maybe I've already made that leap, but I'm realizing that I need to build out some other sources of income too, and I don't know what that might look like for me. But yeah, really sitting in those first couple years of business or that side hustle, those are the clients that I work with and really help get off the ground.
So great to have that support and someone there, also a podcast to listen to that gives you all that support. But I remember the first few years of business were kind of lonely and tough and saturated with all sorts of guys and government programs that weren't really aligned with what I wanted to do or where I was going. So it was an interesting time. So it's awesome that there's some support for women that are just getting going.
Yeah. The support and a sense of community is so important. I mean, I remember when I was kind of thrown into the situation a little bit at one point, where I had lost my job at one of the points in which I was just doing some freelancing. But, it was exactly that, where I could message a friend. I'm like, oh, hey, you want to grab lunch today? And they're like, no, I'm working. And I'm thinking, well, I mean, I'm working too. My schedule just looks a lot different. And it was kind of then when I started realizing, hey, my schedule looks a lot different than the average person. I'm not just Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And so you do kind of feel alone, you're kind of off in your own little world. And I really wanted to give women a place to kind of land and a place to go. And so offering that podcast, and I created a community on social media for it as well.
That's awesome. I love it. Where were you 12 years ago when I started my business? That would have been exactly the kind of group I was be totally dying to get in touch with and be a part of. That community can really support you for a long time in those first lonely few years of business.
Serious.
Yeah.
And all the ideas running through your head, and you're like, is this even a good idea? Should I be doing this? Am I spending too much money on that? And just, oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I know there's so many circles. And can you imagine the entrepreneurial path would look a little bit straighter had you had some more guidance? Mine was a very very windy path to an overnight success in 10 years, right?
Right.
Just kidding. So what's something that's been surprising that you've learned from experience from doing your podcast for the last few months?
I think what's been interesting to me, so many people are nervous about even being on a podcast. And I think it's one of those things that holds them back. And that's been a little bit of an eye-opener for me, because to me, it just seemed so simple, oh, you're going to hand me a microphone. Cool. And so, but for so many people, especially if you do have a fear of speaking, which is a very common fear for a lot of people. They're almost intimidated to come onto a podcast. And so that's been interesting. But one of the things that I've loved is that, because one of the things that I really hone in on with my clients is kind of overcoming those fears and the imposter syndrome and all of these other things, and being able to speak freely about your business and what you offer. And so then I get to kind of do that as a podcaster too. And I'm like, man, this is like a dream. I get to just have fun and I'm still doing what I love. Like it's just been amazing.
That's cool. And that's when you know your podcast is really well aligned to you and your business, right? Because you're having fun, yet it's actually technically you're working, but you're doing it well.
Yeah, I love it. I love
That's
it.
great. Well, did you have any fears or hesitations before you started?
Oh my gosh, so many fears. I stayed stuck for so long. It was, and it was funny to me now when I look back at where I stayed stuck. And I think for me, it was because I had in my head that I needed to have certain pieces done before I could move to the next step. So in my mind, okay, well, I need to handwrite out an intro and handwrite out an outro and a trailer and do all these things. And I thought, I don't know exactly what I want to say. I know that if I just start talking, like the right thing will come. And instead, I stayed stuck forever on how I was going to write this out. And then finally one day it just hit me and I was like, what if I just turn on the microphone and I hit record and I record something, and then I see if I like any of that, and maybe I transcribe it, and maybe then I've got it done. And so for me, that was like the biggest thing to just overcome. Just hit the daggone record button. And then it was just that simple. I mean, in like a Saturday afternoon, I was done with all these pieces to my podcast. I was like, this was simple.
You're definitely a podcaster, because that same thing happens to me when I have to write something. I get this like big like mound of like anxiety, and it's like, oh, and like this article is like such a big thing, and like if I just like hit record and like talk to it, oh, it'll be done in like so quick.
Done. Yeah,
Done.
for sure.
Well, that's exciting. That's great that you kind of clicked into that. And it's funny because as we're revamping our entrepreneur or Amplify You podcast launching program, that's something that we're incorporating in, because I know it's a spot that a lot of people get stuck in. We're going to have open office hours where you come in and record. So you come in and go to a breakout room, and we have the coach there. Brayden will be there, and you just go and record right there. So hopefully that will help some people through that sticking point too, of just getting instead of having to script it and write it out, just go and press record and get going.
Yes. Oh, that's invaluable. Honestly, that the office hours that are offered, those are just invaluable tools anyway, so that you can kind of break through all those ideas that you're having and figure out where you're stuck and why. So that's going to be a great offering.
Yeah, I think that will really help people get through that spot. I know so many people get stuck on that spot too, and just like, I think the clarity comes from speaking and pressing recording and sharing your message over and over again. And I think, something I'm going to start suggesting people do is just go and get on a couple of podcasts that you don't really they're not the big shows. They're just, small micro podcasts that you can practice sharing your message. That might help too, I think. Just because now that you're behind the mic as a podcaster, I'm sure that message is super clear, and it's very fun to share, because now you got that clarity, right?
Right. It's super fun to share. And I agree. Prior to starting my own podcast, I had been a guest on a couple of podcasts, and that really kind of set everything off from there. Right. So I couldn't agree more. See if you can find a podcast that you can be a guest on and give the waters a little test and see. That's a great option.
That's awesome. So what would be some advice you would give to someone, say, that are sitting at home right now listening to this episode, thinking about doing a podcast? What would you share with them?
Oh man, I would share that first of all, it's just so much fun. If you're someone who maybe struggles with things like creating content, or struggles when you are asked to sit down and write something, or is struggling with clarity, or maybe you are finding even time. And so this is interesting. I used to use time as somewhat of an excuse. Well, I can't go out and physically meet people, but you still want to engage in those opportunities, but also online networking meetings where there's, 50 people on a screen, you don't really get that one-on-one interaction you're looking for. I would say give podcasting a try. If you enjoy talking and you want to create content in a way that works better for you, that's not just sitting down with a pen and paper, definitely give podcasting a try. It is so much fun, and you get those connections that you're craving through just having a good time and talking.
I love that. It's such a good inspiration for people to hear that. And just keep going. Just keep going. Don't worry about it. Don't make it so difficult. Just get going. Where does the name A Whole Lotta Shift come from?
A Whole Lotta Shift. So I was trying to come up with a name, and you know what? It was funny. I got stuck on a name as well, which was something else that I was like, I don't want to be stuck on this. And so when I was really kind of playing around with, okay, well, what exactly do I do? What am I creating? What's the transformation, right? And I started thinking about somebody who's leaving their 9 to 5 shift or what have you, but that the changes that occur, especially in your first couple of years of business, and even to grow into that entrepreneur, those changes aren't necessarily business changes. Those changes are self-growth changes. The way that you as a person are going to change or shift is probably going to be more than you've ever done. And so it just kind of came to me, like changing from a 9 to 5 shift to making a shift as a person. I was like, it's a whole lot of shifts.
I love it. And I was also thinking, like, instead of saying like a whole lot of shit, it's like a whole lot of shift. Because there's a lot of things you got to do as a new entrepreneur too, right?
So many things to think about, so much to do. Yeah. So that was where it came from, was just thinking about all the changes that occur. So
awesome. I love it. Well, this has been super fun to chat with you getting a behind the mic sneak peek into your new podcast, A Whole Lotta Shift. Anything else you want to share with our listeners today before we let you go? And also, where can we find out more information about how, obviously, go check out Jen's podcast, A Whole Lotta Shift. Give her some love. Go give her a review. Tell her how much you love it. And then anywhere else we can find how to work with you. Maybe someone's sitting at home wanting to become an entrepreneur and it's like, hey, Jen's my girl. Let's go.
For sure. So go check out the Whole Lotta Shift podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms. We also have another community on Facebook, and it's A Whole Lotta Shift Facebook group. So I encourage you to go there and find it and become a member and really engage in that community. It's great. And you can find me on Facebook or Instagram under Jen Ingram. I really encourage you to go out, give me a follow. I encourage that anytime you're going to be working with somebody for any kind of coaching or mentoring experience, go ahead and see if you're aligned with them. And so go ahead and go out and friend that person and see what they're about and learn a little bit more about them. But yeah, I definitely recommend giving the podcast a listen. You'll get to learn a whole lot more about me, and you'll get a lot of tips and tricks along the way. So, and the only last thing I would say is, if you're thinking about doing a podcast, stop thinking about it. Just do it. You won't regret it.
Awesome. Great words of advice. I love that. All right. You heard it here, Amplify You family. If you're thinking about it, just go out and do it. Give us a call. We're happy to help you. And Jen, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. Amplify You family. We'll see you again here next week on Amplify You. Take care, everyone. Thank you, family, for joining us on this adventure. If you're ready to be heard, head over to mypodcastcoach.com, where you'll find out all the tools and tips you'll need to launch your podcast today. If you have a show already and you need some help managing it, please head over to managemypodcast.com, and the Amplify You team would be happy to help you manage your podcast. Please also head over to iTunes, like, subscribe, and review our show so we can spread this message. And until next time, be your own unique genius.